Okay, this is Arizona 211, which is fine aggregate specific gravity. For fine aggregate specific gravity, you run it on minus number 4 material or minus number 8 material. Most of the time it's going to be minus number 4. We need approximately 1,200 grams to begin with. Weigh out our 1,200 grams. We're going to initially dry this to a constant weight. The procedure for drying it to a constant weight is put it in the oven at 230 degrees Fahrenheit for a minimum of 1 hour. Take it out, weigh it to the nearest 0.1 gram. Put it back in the oven for a minimum of 30 minutes. Take it back out, weigh it to the nearest 0.1 gram. You keep drying it in intervals of a minimum of 30 minutes and weighing it until you lose no more than 0.1 gram. That is considered constant weight. And we're going to let it cool. Once it's cooled, we add water to cover it. And we're going to let it soak for 15 to 19 hours. At the end of that 15 to 19 hours, we have to carefully decant the water, making sure that we don't lose any fines. I decant all that water off of there. Okay, so now I have my sample here. I'm going to spread it out on my non-absorbent surface. Of course, it's going to be a lot wetter than this. This is close to SSD, but it's not exactly after I decanted the water. Now I'm going to work this material, mix it up good, spread it out, let it cool, or let it dry, I'm sorry. And I can use a current of warm or ambient air in order to cool it. The fan works good. A gentle current blows over it, dries it. You want to make sure it dries evenly, so every once in a while you will have to stir it. Get all the parts that are drying on the outside back into the middle so it doesn't dry on the edges faster than the middle. Keep doing that until I get close to SSD. I want to be wetter than SSD on my first trial. It's getting close. Want to make sure you mix the material thoroughly. Grabbing my cone and my tamper, I'm going to place the cone in the material. Fill it up with the other hand. You fill it to overflowing, and then another scoop or two above it. I need to apply 25 blows with my rammer, starting 0.2 inches above the top of the material, which is about 1/4 inch. Remove the excess from around the cone. As you do this, make sure that the cone doesn't move. Now lift straight up on the cone. Now I shook a little bit there, causing it to slough. If on the first trial it sloughs, we don't know if we're right at SSD or drier than SSD. So on the first trial, you would have to add a few drops of water, a few milliliters. Okay, once you add the water, mix it thoroughly. Then you're going to have to cover it and let it set for a minimum of 30 minutes. It lets that moisture distribute throughout the sample. At the end of that time, you continue doing your cone test, checking for the SSD condition. SSD is saturated surface dry. Okay, then it remained molded. That means it is wetter than SSD. So I would keep drying it. And testing it with the cone until I do reach the SSD condition. Once it nears SSD condition, you're going to have to test it with the cone frequently in order to make sure that you get it at the SSD condition and not drier than SSD. Again, every time before you use your cone test, you have to make sure it's mixed thoroughly. Now my material has sloughed. That means I am at the SSD condition. I don't want to lose any moisture now before I get weigh out my samples. So I'm going to put it into a container. I'm going to cover it so it doesn't lose moisture, and now I can proceed with getting the amount of material I need for my samples. Okay, so now I have my sample protected from moisture loss. I can come over here. I have to weigh out a sample that's going to be introduced into my pycnometer. It has to be 500 plus or minus 10 grams. It's 499.4. I have to record that weight. Again, cover up my sample here. This is going to be introduced into the pycnometer. Now at the same time, I can weigh out a sample that's going to be put in the oven and determining my oven dried weight. Again, that has to be between 500 plus or minus 10 grams, and it has to be within 0.2 grams of my sample that's going into my pycnometer. So that was 499.2. I can put in 499.4 is what I read, so I could put 499.2 to 499.6. Okay, 499.4. That's exactly what I had for my sample I'm putting in my pycnometer. This sample is going into an oven at 230 plus or minus 9 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm going to dry that to a constant weight. Again, the procedure for drying to a constant weight is I have to leave it in the oven for a minimum 1 hour, take it out, weigh it to the nearest tenth of a gram, 0.1 gram, put it back in the oven for a minimum of 30 minutes, take it back out, weigh it to the nearest 0.1 gram. I keep drying it in intervals of a minimum of 30 minutes and weighing it until I lose no more than 0.1 gram. At the end of that time, I need to set it to the side, let it cool. For this, you let it cool for 1 hour plus or minus a half an hour. And after that, then you go ahead and weigh it to the nearest 0.1 gram, and that gives you your oven dried weight. While that's drying in the oven, I would come over here to my sample that goes into my pycnometer. Before I place it into my pycnometer, I have to make sure that my pycnometer has been calibrated. To calibrate the pycnometer, You're going to fill it with water at a temperature of 77 plus or minus 3 degrees Fahrenheit up to its calibrated line. There's a real light line around the top of this neck. You fill it up so that the bottom of the meniscus is sitting on top of that line. That is the calibration. You make sure you get the temperature of the water, 77 plus or minus 3 degrees Fahrenheit. Dry off the neck, dry off the outside, weigh it to the nearest 0.1 gram. That is the calibrated weight of your pycnometer. So now I have a calibrated pycnometer. Before I introduce my sample into it, I need to partially fill my pycnometer with water. It's a little bit in the bottom there. Using a funnel, you can introduce your sample into the pycnometer. Now I need to fill the pycnometer to approximately 90% of its total capacity. That's up to the calibration line. As I'm doing that, I'm rinsing material that's clinging to the neck. Now I have it filled to 90% of its capacity approximately. I'm going to agitate it to remove any air bubbles, or all the air bubbles. It's going to take a little while to do this. You can agitate it like I'm doing right now. You can put it on your surface, roll it. You can see that there's air bubbles being released from the sample. You just keep doing this until you get all the air bubbles out. You can see here, I'm going to say all the bubbles are gone. You can see there's foam in the neck here. You can use a few drops of 99% isopropyl alcohol in order to dispel those bubbles. This little bottle has the alcohol in it. Just a few drops. Okay, so now you can see how the few drops of alcohol dispel the bubbles, the foam in there. Now I need to fill this up to the calibration line. Now I usually fill it just below the calibration line. I need to get the temperature of my sample. Make sure it's 73 plus or minus 3 degrees Fahrenheit. Now if it's not, I need to bring it to that temperature. I can do that in a circulating water bath that's set to 77 plus or minus 3. That's the preferred method. So now I am close to my calibration line. It's at the correct temperature. I need to bring it to my calibration line. I like to use a pipette to do that. You need to do it at eye level. Make sure that you get the bottom of the meniscus resting on top of the calibration. Now I have it to the calibration line. I have to have a towel to dry off the inside of the neck above the calibration line. Make sure you don't get into the material itself. I'm getting all the water drops that are above my sample. Make sure that the neck is dried. Make sure the outside of your pycnometer is dried. Weigh this to the nearest 0.1 gram. Now, I went ahead and spread out a sample from my oven dried. If you didn't, then you're going to have a big pan. All of this material has to be placed into this big pan. without making sure that you don't lose any. Get all of the material that's in your pycnometer. And this total sample has to be dried. You can let the material settle some and decant some of the water, making sure you don't lose any material. Or just put that in the oven and let it dry. It's going to take a lot longer to dry. Okay, I've already explained the oven dried. So I have my SSD weight. I have my weight in my pycnometer, which is the weight in water. And I have my oven dried weight. And I have the calibration weight of my pycnometer. Those are the numbers that you need to do your calculations for specific gravity.
Please be sure to review all of the materials available in your Soils and Aggregate Technician Certification Workbook.